how do we rectify this historical injustice and ongoing injustice? How do we affirm and secure justice for Jewish refugees from Arab countries, which is the raison d'etre for our being here? And so, in accordance with the theme of this panel, I'm going to share with you an action agenda. I want to say that it's going to be a 12-point action agenda, but I don't want you to get scared. I'm going to do it in very abbreviated form, a set of one-liners. This is an informed audience. It doesn't need elaboration, but I do think it's important to set before us an action agenda, because that, after all, is the reason we are here. Number one, it must be appreciated as a generic moral and legal principle that justice delayed can no longer be denied. The time has come to not only rectify this historical injustice and to restore the plight and pain of Jewish refugees of Arab countries onto the peace and justice narrative of the day, but to ensure that people understand that this was not only and not only remains a forgotten exodus, but it was a forced exodus, and that it requires redress for purposes of justice. Number two, rights and remedies that are accorded, generally speaking, in international law to victim refugee population, including rights of remembrance, of truth, of redress, and justice, must be accorded equally to Jewish refugees uprooted and displaced from Arab countries. Third, in the manner of roles, responsibility, and accountability, each of the Arab countries and the Arab League itself, as former Justice of the Supreme Court, Justice Goldberg, Arthur Goldberg, put it, and we co-chaired a citizens tribunal on this 25 years ago in 1987. And as he said then, and I reaffirm today, each of the Arab countries must acknowledge their own role and responsibility in launching this double aggression. Simply put, the culture of impunity which has prevailed to the present day must end. A culture of accountability must be put in place. Fourth, the Arab League Peace Plan of 2002 must incorporate the question of Jewish refugees uprooted from Arab countries in the same way that the Israeli peace position does incorporate the question of Palestinian refugees. Number five, at the international level, and in particular at the United Nations General Assembly, which has adopted some 170 standard conventions, some 170 resolutions on the issue of Palestinian refugees only. Not one, I repeat, not one resolution ever on the issue of Jewish refugees from Arab countries must now, in the pursuit of equity and justice, accord equal reference and representation to the issue of Jewish refugees from Arab countries, and this holds true for every other United Nations agency that deals with this issue, such as the United Nations Council on Human Rights and the like. Sixth, the annual November 29th commemoration of the UN Partition Resolution has turned into an international day of solidarity with the Palestinian people only, and with an international day of remembrance with respect to Palestinian refugees only, and with an international day of blame for the Jewish people only. That too must now come to an end. When November 29th International Commemorative Day is celebrated, it has to celebrate it in terms of two peoples, and has to make reference to two sets of refugees, and it must accord the blame where it in fact resides. Number seven, the jurisdiction over Palestinian refugees must be transferred from UNRWA, which in fact has both used and abused the situation of Palestinian refugees and has served, and which has served as a forum for hate and incitement against Israel and the Jewish people, while not serving as a framework or forum for rehabilitating Palestinian refugees. That jurisdiction must be transferred out of UNRWA's jurisdiction into the United Nations Council Commissioner for Refugees, why should the Palestinian refugee situation remain the only refugee population in the world having a separate jurisdiction, and a separate jurisdiction which ends up authorizing and validating incitement and under the protective cover of the United Nations? That too must come to an end. Eight, any bilateral Israel-Palestinian negotiations, which one would hope would presage an Israeli-Palestinian peace, must include the issue of Jewish refugees as well as Palestinian refugees in an inclusive joinder of reference. If there's reference only to Palestinian refugees, this is not a just and fair process. Number 9, during any and all discussions on the Middle East by the Quartet or any other agency involved, any explicit reference to Palestinian refugees must include explicit reference to the pain and plight of Jewish refugees. Number 10, in making the case for justice, priority, and which is, as I say, our raison d'etre, priority must be given to the voices, to the authentic witness testimony of the Jewish refugees themselves. As we've heard from Edwin now, and as we've heard earlier in this conference, they are the most effective representation of the authentic case for justice for Jewish refugees from Arab countries, the most compelling evidence we have. Number 11, it is important that this whole issue be taught in the Israeli and diaspora school system. The whole question of Higadata Levincha is crucial, lest the ignorance of one's own history result even in Jews acquiescing in the false and misleading history as portrayed by others. If we don't know our own case, we will indulge the falsity that is being portrayed about us. And therefore, I want to commend the two initiatives that were mentioned earlier by Deputy Minister Ayalon with regard to a day of remembrance, and by Deputy Minister Leoness with regard to a museum of national heritage. This is crucial because, regrettably, education in Israel has had an undue Eurocentric approach. I'm not criticizing all the education with regard to the Shoah, chas v'chalila, and I'm making no analogies. I'm just saying that one has to include the question of what happened in terms of the plight and pain of Jewish refugees from Arab countries and the justice now of that claim in Jewish education here and in the diaspora. Number 12, and finally, we need to replicate on a parliamentary level the hearings that have been held in the U.S. Congress, in Italy, etc., and I'm delighted that Congressman Nadler has now joined us, because I want to pay tribute to him, as have others, for his initiative not only on the resolution but on the bill. That sets a precedent and a model for what other countries can do. And I want to make reference to the fact as well that a Canadian Prime Minister Paul Martin, remains still one of the few political leaders in the world that has made reference to the plight of Jewish refugees from Arab countries, not only as far back as when he was Prime Minister in 2004, 2005, but has continued to do so since no longer being a Prime Minister, an expression really of his commitment to the case and cause. In conclusion, let me just say that the exclusion and denial of rights and remedies to Jewish refugees from Arab countries continues to prejudice authentic negotiations between the parties themselves, between Israelis and Palestinians, continues to undermine the search for peace and justice, continues to fuel the delegitimization process against Israel and the Jewish people, and a host of other prejudicial fallouts. Let there be no mistake about it. Where there is no remembrance, there will be no truth. Where there is no truth, there will be no justice. Where there is no justice, there will be no redress. Where there is no redress, there will be no authentic reconciliation. And where there is no authentic reconciliation, there will be no peace. And so our collective struggle here, our individual and collective struggle here for remembrance, for redress, for truth and justice and peace are one and the same struggle. And justice for Jewish refugees from Arab countries is at the core of that collective struggle. Thank you.